Okay, can you see my screen right now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now the objectives will be to understand the database auditing environment, then to list the basic objectives of an audit. It will be basically here the generic, let's say, objectives. Then to list the benefits and side effects of an auditing process. So let's go for some of the definitions before we go to discuss about auditing in details. First of all, an audit or auditing is a process of examining and validating documents, data, processes, procedures, and systems. Okay. In our case, for our database auditing, we'll be mainly focusing on what is the data that we have in our system, and also we'll see later how we can, let's say, monitor these data, or what are the tools available to do that. Then we have something called audit log, which is basically the document that contains all activities that are being audited, ordered in sequential manner. Okay. Then we have audit objectives, and this basically will be a set of business rules, system controls, government regulations, or security policies. So we'll see later when we discuss about auditing in general, the source of audit objectives is not only coming from one source. That means it can be from business rules, that means internally inside the organization, or it can be system control, or in some cases, as I will show to emphasize on for this lecture, is government regulations. Is there government regulations for auditing? I will go to show you some of these examples, okay, while we are proceeding in the lecture. Then we have the security policies, okay. Then we have the auditor, which will be the person authorized to audit in general. Then we have the audit report, which is document or the document that contains all the audit findings. Then we have the data audit, which is sequential record of data changes stored in log file or database table object. Now, if you remember earlier when we done the trigger part, the last example, and a trigger was what? Was auditing, right? So what we have done here, we have created a table, and then we have create or we add the information in this table. If you, let me just show you the example so you can remember it. We applied the audit, okay, using the ML triggers on the client table, okay, on our Dream Home database. So let me just show you. Okay, if I go here for my Dream Home database, and then I'll go for the tables. Notice here we have the client table. Let me just select the information. And also we have the client audit table, Okay, so this is what the client audit that I have used. So triggers is one of the tools that I will go to what? To save the data, or what you call it as data audit. Okay, so these are sequential records of data changes stored on log files or database table object. Database auditing is basically sequential record of database activities. Okay, so this is basically the basic definitions. Now the important part will be when I go for what you call it as auditing environment components. In the auditing environment components, in general, I will have 4 components. Then later, if I assign this to a database, it will become 5 components. These auditing environment components are generic. That means can be applied on databases, or let's say accounting systems, or any other system. And these objectives are, or these components are the following. The first one, objectives. An audit without set of objectives is useless. Now, I want to highlight this from now. I noticed earlier, simply students will go to apply what? Some set, because you are like security students, just students will go to say, oh, I want to apply encryption, or I want to apply maybe, say permission to access, to allow the users to access the system, and so on, without having an objective. If you don't have an objective, simply later you can't measure how much your system is secure. That means later we'll have an issue. Later we'll have an issue to determine that, to determine is your system is really secured or not. So usually objective is very important, either the generic objective, as I will show you right now, or the detailed objective, as we'll see in next example, especially when I go for the tools that I'll go to use for what? For auditing in general. Okay, so the first thing is what? Objectives. Second thing is the procedures, which is basically step-by-step instructions and tasks. So here basically, when we apply auditing, I must know how I want to apply these things. Also, I want to know which tools I want to use to make sure that I'm meeting with what? With my objective. As we'll see later, or let me give you an example right now. Let's assume that I have here salary column in my staff table. Salary column in my staff table. Now let's assume one of the objectives is that says that the HR manager, okay, will monitor, let's say, salary changes or updates. Now this is the objective in general. Now when I go for the procedure, how I want to apply this, you will see that I will have different tools to do that. Like for example, we see later in the next lectures. First of all, I can apply encryption. I can say, okay, this column, not all the table, this column only is encrypted. And the person who have the key will be only the HR manager. This is one case. This is one technique. Second technique, I can create a DML trigger as what we have done earlier. And then I will go to create an audit table for salary, so I can track any changes happen to what? To my data. This can be the second thing that used to enforce, let's say, protecting, for example, our data. I can also use a tool called Audit, which basically I will cover it next lecture. So here I will have something called Audit. And under Audit here, I can have something called server audit specifications, and I can have something called database audit specifications. So that means I can track the actions that happens either on database level or what, or on the server level. Because notice here, this is on what? Under security, which is on the server level. Okay, so I will go to emphasize more on the techniques later, more than the theory component. Now, people will be basically the auditor, the employees, managers, and DBAs, maybe programmers. So anyone involved in what? In the audit process in general. Audited entities also will be people, documents, processes, and systems. These are what? These are the four components of, let's say, auditing environment in general. So if I want to go here, notice we will have the people, where I will have the staff, managers, security, administrators, and auditors. The objectives: meet organization's policies, maintain document accuracy, or meet system goals. Okay, procedures, step by step, processes, instructions, regulations, and laws. Employees, let's say examples for audit entities can be employees, documents, process, systems, and activities. I'm moving a little bit fast here because usually if I just simply highlight this from theory point of view, students will be a little bit confused. So usually I prefer later to go to examples. Actually, we'll begin this basically in the next lecture. Okay. Now, when I go for the database audit environment, here I will add the database component. So earlier we have the objectives, right? We have the people, we have the audited entities, we have the procedures, and now we have what? We have the database. So database activities, basically, data changes, data accuracy, data files, and operating system. Now, auditing in general can include not only database management system, but also other environment thing. That means the operating system itself. Sometimes where this database is located in first place, okay, to ensure that we have that level of security and so on. So all of these can be considered in what? In the audit process. But for us, we are focusing on what? On the actions inside our database. We are not going for audit in generic term, I will say, or the scope just will be on what? On our database management system or in our database. Okay, clear till now? Any question? Any question till now? Okay, now let's go for, if I want to ask, from where I will get the auditing, let's say, objectives, or who can enforce, okay, let's go with the question other way. Who can enforce auditing objectives, okay, on an organization? That means it will be only internal, or also I will have external factors. That means who is adding the objectives? Who is adding the auditing objectives?
Admin.
Admin can be, right? Administrators can be. Who else? Organization itself, right? Maybe the managers, they'll say, okay, I will go to add objectives. Can be. Some of the objectives could be from the organization itself. Let me give you an example. Let's assume that we decided to create an accounting system. We create what? We decided to apply, for example, an accounting system on our company. Sorry, in our company. So the objective to do the auditing can be from the organization itself. This is correct. Can I have objectives from outside the organization?
Sir, the government?
Government, for sure. Government can be what? Can be one of the sources for what? For auditing objectives. In reality, they can enforce standards. Give you an example. Now, in Malaysia, for example, when you go for the payroll, government is controlling all the payrolls. That means they are doing auditing for that because they want to what? To ensure that the organizations are not playing with these things. For example, maybe the government will say there is minimum, let's say, salary for the employees in the factories. You know, there is always now debate on this issue, either in Malaysia or overseas. So the government want to ensure that the numbers which is given in that program is correct. And these numbers are not violating what the objectives that they have set, which says that, okay, the minimum, let's say, wages, or let's say the minimum, let's say, salary, maybe let's say, for example, 2,000 ringgit for the, you know, the workers or the employees in the factories and so on. So what happens here? It is not the organization who put this rule. No, the organization, if they try to skip this rule, usually they will be happy, right? Because they will try to give always, in general, less salaries. But government will enforce this one. Okay, so now we have what? We have governments that can set and audit objectives. Who else? So we said organization itself, right? We said governments can do that. Who else can do that? Associations. Who can give me an example for associations which inform auditing objectives? Like, let's go for industry. Industry will be more famous than software.
Sir, auditing firms.
they have the name of association. From
Which
there,
one?
I mean, there's an auditing firm. They might have
Okay.
a association, which is the main capital of the auditing or something.
Can be some of them, but my question here is not only the association. Okay, my question here is, what is there other entities that can apply objectives for auditing in organizations? Let's go for the industrial field. It will be easier to get examples more than software. Software is, now I'll go to highlight some examples for software. But in industry, we can give an example for auditing objectives. Did you hear the term ISO? ISO certificates. If you go for the industrial field, you will go for the, to check what we call it, the quality of the processes, the quality of the items, and so on. Usually when you buy any product, in major cases, you will find the ISO certificate. Now, let's assume, for example, if you buy a computer, why you have all these certificates on that computer? Because that organization or that committee will say, if you want to have our certificate, that means to say, okay, you are meeting our standards, you must meet these requirements. And therefore, what they will do later, they will go to make an audit. It's not okay, say, okay, I have applied this process now, it is okay. No. Usually they will go to do audit for everything. Like if you go to check for ISO, let me just show you here. If I go for, usually because this is like, okay, ISO certificate, which is standard, this one, okay. International Organization of Standardization. So if I go for the quality management, and you can check this later, okay. You will find we have what, a set of different ISO, let's say, certificates, and these ISO certificates, they are what? Each one will focus on different aspects of the organization. Like for example, notice here, this is like a quality management systems. Okay, this is, I don't know, we will check later. There are plenty in reality of, notice here, for example, this is the ISO for medical devices. This is for quality management systems and so on. Now, this ISO, they have what? They have, this is a committee usually from what? From the industry stage. This is the highest, or this is the common standard. So if the organization or a factory want to ensure that the products can be, sent all over the world, in this case, they must get these type of certificates. Otherwise, if you check the product, you'll say, oh, where is the certificate? It's not there. So it is not authenticated, or maybe it is not meeting what? The standard criteria for that industry. Okay, so these certificate companies like the ISO, which is famous in industry field, what they are doing basically, they are enforcing, okay, they are enforcing what? The rules and objectives. So that means the organizations must meet with these objectives, either in case of the product, or it will be on what? On the process level. Because, if I'm dealing with like a company which is provided services, I don't have products, I have the service, right, as a product. We call it as a service, as a product from management point of view. So I'll focus on the process, for example. How I handle, let's say, the customers, how let's say I'm dealing with them. Do I have, let's say, CRM systems and so on? Or maybe I have products like computers, for example. So if you just flip, let's say, your laptop, you'll see what? You'll see there are many certificates are there. All of these certificates, before they were added to that laptop, there was an audit process to ensure that. And usually audit process will be done either on yearly basis, or that depends. Like for example, let's go for ABU. In ABU, we have an audit which is done by what? By the higher education. This audit process is done every 5 years. A committee from the higher education will come and they will check all the modules content. They'll check the module contents, the exams, assignments, FIB projects, and so on. So if they found some problems or some issues or something that's not meeting their objectives, What they will do, they will give usually a time for the organization to fix, its condition. Then after that, they will follow up with this. This is why if you recently heard, there were some universities in Malaysia, the higher education took the certificate from them. Why? Because they are not meeting the objectives or they are not meeting the standards. How to make sure that I'm meeting the standard? I must follow up with what? With the auditing process, with the audit process. Okay, clear? Now, I will go here. I will not go for the organization itself to set objectives because it is easy to some extent. Not easy, but it is more clear. I will go for another level, which is the government regulations. Okay. Now, some of the famous, let's say, regulations is SOX, HIPAA for health, and that one is for, let's say, public accounting firms, GBL for finance, PCI-DSS, payment, credit card industry, and so on. Here, just I give two examples in detail, a little bit detailed, just to show you what we mean by that. Okay. Now, SOX specifies that CFO, okay, must do more than simply vouch that their company's finance are accurate. CFO stands for what? Chief Financial, let's say, Officer. Okay. So the idea is that the Chief Financial, let's say, Officer must do more than simply vouch that their company's finance are accurate. What they have to do? They must guarantee the processes used to add up the numbers. Like, for example, if I have a salary, for example, so usually we have something called base salary. Then after that, I have what different allowances to be there. So I must ensure the process is the what calculating all these things, for example. So those processes are typically a computer programs that access data in a database. Now, and DBAs create and manage that data as well as many of those processes. Now we know if I want to save any information in my database, I must have what? A clear of procedures or processes. So in this case, later I will decide which information to save. And if I go to the first topic, when I go for business rules, right? We said for business rules, we have what? We have a structural and we have what? A procedural business rules in general. So, SOX also, for example, also requires that the financial data be hardened against unauthorized access, invalid transactions, and any other type of modification that might invalidate financial reporting integrity. So that means in this, okay, which is Sarbanes, let's say, Oxley regulation, they are not only discussing about, okay, you can just, the organization says, okay, our financial system is good. No, here they will go more on the database level, and also they are going to focus on what? Is there any unauthorized access, any invalid transaction, and any other type of modification that might invalidate financial reporting integrity. Now, if the financial data is in the database, the management and administration practices and use for that database must be shown to be compliant. That means the organization or the station here will go to check on these organizations who apply this regulation, and will go to check their databases, how they maintain their data. Is the way that they maintain their data is valid, and so on. Okay, in general. So, furthermore, the SOX Act demands that companies' financial data must be completely recoverable in the event of logical or physical failure without loss of data that would invalidate the integrity of financial reports, and that recovery must be possible in timely manner. Okay, so all of this is the basic things. If you go to check this later, you can see a lot of details inside it. Okay, and what all the organizations supposed to include in their systems in first place. Okay, this is the first regulation. Let me go for the second regulation. Here we have more examples related to database in more clear way. So This legislation contains the language specifying that the healthcare providers, okay, must protect individual healthcare information. You know, usually in healthcare industry in general, you can't simply just go and check the data about patients. Like, for example, you go to the hospital and you ask for data or the condition of a specific patient. Usually, if you are not first relative, they will not give you that information. Why? Because they ensure that they will say that this information is what? It is very sensitive. It is not allowed to be given to anyone. So here in the HIBAA, okay, regulation, they say what? They said that the person like hospitals, okay, they must ensure that they protect the individual information. Even going so far, that means in these regulations, okay, to state that the provider must be able to document everyone who even so much as looked at their information. That means in their database management systems, for example, they must have triggers or they must have an audit, okay, where they can track anyone who, or maybe look on triggers, as I'll show you later, where the users access or any person access data and what information he has seen. Okay, all of these details are in this regulation, as you can see here. Also, HIBA audits frequently require the examination of the processes used to create, document, and review exception reports and logs. So, for example, when you confront, let's say, with HIBA audit, organizations can be required to produce a list of exceptions to policy, such as when were patients' records accessed, during off hours, and by whom. So imagine they can go to that level. That means they can go to the organization and say, okay, now in our auditing process, please provide a data audit which provide or answer this question. And then they will go to do auditing for this information to see if that organization are really following up with this procedure or not. Okay, so what I want to highlight here is the following: the objectives that we have, okay, to apply on our organization. It has many sources. It can be from government level, as what I have shown here. It can be from inside the organization, like as I mentioned earlier, the organization says, okay, the only person is allowed to view the salary information is the HR manager, or to modify it. In this case, this is the regulation, organization rules or objectives. Later, I will go to use tools to apply this objective. Okay. I hope this is clear. I hope this is clear. Any question till now? Any question till now? Okay, so far so. So why should DBAs care about compliance? Right? Why I should go to care about all these rules? Now let's go from management point of view, okay, to make this more clear. Usually, compliance starts with what? A chief, okay, executive officer. A chief executive officer, right? But it works its way down into the trenches and impacts database administration. The SEO depends on SIO, okay, to ensure that IT processes are compliant. The CIO relies on the IT manager, one of whom the DBA manager. Now here we are talking about organizational hierarchy, okay? So we have different hierarchies usually in organizations, but here, in general, usually we have something called CEO, okay? Then he will focus or he will work with a manager also called SIO, okay? And in some organizations will be in the same level, in some organizations no. CEO will be on the higher level if I go for the hierarchy. To ensure that IT processes are compliant, then the CIO, which is the Chief Information Officer, will depend on what? On database managers or administrators. Okay, so okay, let's go here once again. So SEO relies on the CIO to ensure that IT processes are compliant. Because for them, these people, they don't know about IT things, right? They are managers basically. But they will go for what? The CIO, because he is basically having more information. Now, CIO in some organizations called DA, Data Administrator. Okay, so that depends on which name you want to give it. So CIO will go to ensure that IT processes are compliant. Now, how to do that? He will rely on the IT managers, and the IT managers, either it will be one of them, the DBA manager, or sometimes the IT manager, it will be himself is the IT manager. That means on the size of the organization, because in organizations, I may have only one database administrator. In some organizations, I may have, let's say, 5 database, let's say, administrators. And one of them will be usually, we can call it as IT manager. So that depends. But the concept here, or the idea here is that who is the person in charge to apply the tools or to use the tools to ensure these objectives or to ensure the compliance? It will be the database administrator. Database administrator. So the DBA manager controls database systems, and data DBA manager relies on DBAs to ensure that data is protected and controlled. Now, DBAs are not responsible for developing and enforcing compliance. That means this high level for auditing objectives usually it is not done by DBA. Usually it is given to the DBA and they will tell him, please make sure that this is applied. And he will go to choose what the tools or apply the techniques to ensure that these things is maintained. So therefore, but their job is impacted based upon compliance related to projects and responsibilities. The primary impact of compliance on the DBA is in investing, installing, and managing technology that supports compliance, particularly regarding data and database management systems, because we are discussing from database management systems. Clear? And this is why you'll see later, we don't really involve in the whole audit process. You'll notice that basically our focus on capturing the information for the audit process that we can use later. But for us, we are not covering the whole audit process in general. Clear? Any question till now? So to summarize this slide, DBAs, okay, or database administrators, their duty is what? Their duty is to ensure or is to apply the techniques that can cover the objectives which is added maybe by the CEO or maybe added by the governments as like, you know, the regulations that we have earlier, or maybe the regulations coming from third party, let's say organizations like ISO organization, for example, if I'm in the industry field. Now, when I go for auditing process, the auditing process here ensures that the system is working and compliance with policies, the regulations, and laws, and also business rules. You can add it. Okay? So it will depend on policies, regulations, and laws. Some of these, they are internally from the organization itself. Some of them, they are externally. Now, the auditing process flow will be when I go for the system development life cycle, okay, I will go to define some of the auditing like objectives, okay, and so on. So auditing process will be understanding the objectives, review, verify, and validate the system, then document the result. Here just I want to highlight two things, because here basically it's focusing on the system development life cycle, but auditing process can be while I'm developing the application. So for example, if I have a set of objectives or constraints or business rules, this will be applied while I am doing what? Executing the system, developing the system. This is one part. But also there is another part after I finish what? After I finish the whole development. That means, okay, I develop the software, implement it on the client, let's say PCs and so on. Later, there will be also an audit process to ensure the data is correct. Okay, so here we have in the development life cycle in general. Okay, we have the general phases as planning, analysis, design, development, testing, and implementation. Now, in this case, we need to know what are the policies, laws, regulations, and industry standards must be incorporated as a part of the system requirement as specifications. That means when I have, the system requirements, okay, which is basically the function requirements, or even if I have the non-function requirements, I must make sure that all of these, they are listed there. So that to ensure that when I build the system is maintained. Let me give you an example. In accounting systems, the taxation percentage usually supposed to be created in a system in a way no one can modify it except a few people. That means when they go to do an audit for an accounting system, they will ensure, okay, that the taxation value, okay, percentage on like 10%, 15%, that depends. This must be added in the system in a way that no one can easily modify that tax value. Why? Because they want to ensure that they are following not industrial standards, they want to ensure that they are following what? With the government regulations. With the government regulations. So you can't just simply live with the taxation. Okay? And this is why usually doing licensing for something like accounting systems or banking systems in general is more hard to be done. It is not easy. It's not like, oh, I create an e-commerce website, yes, I'm selling items. You can now do that. Nobody will ask you about that. Okay? But when you go for financial thing, for example, no. If you go for more extreme cases like, safety systems, no, that thing is another level. Like, for example, we're working, let's say, with airplanes, let's say, with something like trains, elevators, no. The systems there must be really good. Even if usually when we teach software engineering, we'll go to show the phases for the development. And one of the phases is it will be testing, for example. In the safety system, maybe testing will be the period, will be more the whole development time. That means from getting the requirements to the analysis to the implementation. Why? Because safety is very important aspect. And I think maybe all of you remember the recent case that happens with Boeing, for example. When the Boeing company, they have, let's say, produced a new set of, let's say, aircrafts, then suddenly two airlines were like destroyed. Suddenly nobody just going to go for the autopilot mode. Suddenly the airplane will be destroyed. Luckily, there is one airplane. By chance, one of the passengers was an old, let's say, pilot. So when he feel, let's say, the airplane was going down, he directly communicated with the captain and he manually controlled the airplane. He shut off the autopilot. He have experience, so the passengers, they were lucky on that, on that part. Otherwise, it would be under disaster. When they check later the programs, they found, unfortunately, the testing period was cut down. That means some of the objectives were not tested. That means there was no auditing happened for that in first place. So the disasters unfortunately happened, and now the whole line already have been, let's say, stopped till, going for further investigations and so on. Okay, so here we'll have, let's say, production. I need to understand the objectives, make sure objectives are well defined, review, verify, and validate. So ensure that auditing objectives are met according to business policies and specifications. Then report and document, identify changes to provide feedback to system development phase. So in this case, if we found okay, there is some issues or maybe some of the rules were not added and so on. So what we do, we go and implement or emphasize this on the system itself. Also, I want to highlight, because now we are moving to online education in general, we were really suffering from this concept. And the last auditing process, there was a lot of issues. There was like when the higher education came to check for the online things, it was okay, but there is a lot of things need to be improved because till now, we are in the phase of, handling all these processes in general. Okay, so this is basically was the issue. Any question till now? Okay. Now the auditing objectives can be either generic objectives, okay, or can be more detailed objectives. For now, generic can be something like, I want to ensure data integrity, I want to ensure data confidentiality, or let's say secrecy. I want to let's say, check for access control. I want to check for data changes, okay. I want to check for data structure changes, and later I will show you that we can track all of this. That means I can track, okay, if the table was modified or not. Okay, who is controlling this system? Who is the user is doing that? Who is doing, let's say, insert, update, delete actions on a specific, let's say, table or column and so on. Okay, these are generic objectives, but later we have what? We have more specific objectives. So we have two sets of objectives. We have generic, and we have what? We have specific. Specific would be like, I would say, okay, salary column values must be only accessed by what? HR manager. Now, how to enforce, or which tools to use to ensure that, this is another discussion. I will go to highlight it while we are moving in the next lectures in general. Okay. So any question till now? Any question till now? Okay, so the benefits will be, first of all, enforces company policies and government regulations and laws, right? As we have highlighted earlier. Identify security gaps and weaknesses. Provide an audit trail for activities. Provide means to observe and evaluate operations of the audit entities. Make the organizations more accountable. So usually if there is something goes wrong, I can pinpoint the person who is really doing that action. Otherwise, simply I may don't know, and that will cause more problems. Develops controls that can be used for the purpose of other than auditing. Okay. Now, what is the side effect in general? Side effect can be performance problems. For example, when I go to create triggers, one of the major issues with the trigger is what? It is the performance issue. For example, here, when I go for the staff table, and I go here for the triggers, the problem now, maybe I'm tracking, maybe I'm doing, let's say, join statement, for example. So the result was, to get the result, maybe it was slow. If I didn't be aware that we have triggers here, I will spend too much time doing the work on the table or the query. Then I realize, oh, there is triggers working on this table. So that means each time I do, maybe, let's say, insert or update, you have like one or two triggers, and that will affect my performance. Because if I'm having an audit, that means I will have a lot of recording that will be happening, to collect all these data, and that will utilize the resources that we have. Okay. Too many reports and documents, in general, yes, it will be there. Consumption of resources and add cost from downtime, for sure. Because that means, let's say, if I'm doing, let's say, the SQL Server, then if I open something called the profiler, let me just show you here. Later I'll show you this tool. I go for something called SQL Server Profiler. I said, okay, let's this thing work. What will happen? A process will be there. Okay, let me just select the events. Assume I want to track everything. Then I will say run. Okay. Now what will happen here? If you just let me show you. Later I will just give more detailed example for this one. But anything that I will go to add here directly will be stored in this audit. So notice here what happens. It says, oh, select the information from, let's say, branch table. Then if I want to, let's say, maybe create a table. So everything that I'm doing here simply is just recorded in this using the profiler, for example, software. So if I go here once again, select this top information, notice I get all this information. Now the issue is that this will take resources. I'm not sure if in the Windows it will be there, but let me check. Okay. Do we have the profiler? Okay, let's check. Okay. Maybe arrange by name. Okay, notice here we have, no, this is the SQL, this is the profiler. Notice, for example, it is utilizing what? The memory and so on. So what happens here, I'm utilizing what? The resources that I have. Okay, let me just take the attendance, then I will continue with the remaining of. Okay, so in this case, this is the lab, right? Right, proceed. Mark attendance, continue. Okay. Now, in the next lecture, I will go discuss about the SQL Server audit, okay, and show you how this works. And also, I will go to cover the DDL triggers and what do you call it as log-on triggers, Can't update the attendance. Okay, so go here. Then I will say.
Sir, me too. I cannot update the attendance.
Okay, your name, Yasmin?
Yeah, number 38.
Okay. Yaqeen Adib? Shalan?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. Your name is Yaqeen or Shalan? The family name. Your first name is? Okay. Okay. Now, Abdullah Sami. Okay. Any other question before I finish today's lecture? Okay, so that's all for today. See you next lecture, which is tomorrow, right? Assalamu alaikum.
Sir,
Yes.
I'm actually here present. I'm Sari Khaled.
Your name is Siri Khalid.
Turkey.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Most welcome. Most welcome.
Sir,
Yes,
I'm
sir.
Lee here. Previously, I already sent you a few some questions a few weeks ago, and you haven't had time to
Okay.
fill those
Reality,
messages.
I'm checking now trying to clear the set of questions or
Yeah,
let's say
okay.
chats or teams. So I will check it, then I will send you my reply by these 2 days. Okay. So because I'm now just clearing all of these.
Okay, sure. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Most welcome. Most welcome. Okay. So that's all for today. That's all. And assalamu alaikum. Have a nice day. And take care.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Assalamu alaikum.